Welcome to another edition of Marriage, for Better, for Worse. Greetings, I'm Pastor Bob Moeller. I'm your host for this program. In this episode, we're going to be addressing the topic, 10 ways to restore your relationship with your adult children. 10 ways you can restore your relationship with your adult children. We'll get to that in just a moment. At the outset, let me say that I'm not a professional counselor, psychologist, psychiatrist, marriage therapist. Rather, I'm a pastor who believes that listening, caring, prayer, and God's Word can restore relationships. Let me also encourage you to consider getting a copy of our new book, The 6 Hearts of Intimacy. Enjoying deeper love and passion in your marriage, The 6 Hearts of Intimacy, published by Whitaker House. You can go to any online major book distributor and order a copy. It has study questions at the end of each chapter. It would be ideal for a small group discussion or class. So, The 6 Hearts of Intimacy, let me commend that to you. Well, in a minute, we're going to be looking at the topic, ways to restore your relationship with your adult child, as well as questions that relate to this topic. And let me say that these questions are drawn from my own experience, from questions that were put directly to me, situations I've encountered in my ministry or others in the ministry have shared with me. And so we fashion them in the form of questions for the sake of clarity and impact. And so just a word about that. Well, let's get to our scripture for this program, Luke chapter 15. We're going to be looking at verses 20 through 24. Let me set the background for this particular passage. It is the parable of the prodigal son. In this story, a young son goes to his father and demands his share of the estate, even though his father has not died. Well, we can consider in our time how inappropriate that would be. And in the time of Christ, that was a huge insult to do such a thing, very dishonoring. But nonetheless, the father grants him his request, and he goes off for maybe months or years, and the father gets word or hears stories of the wild living, drunkenness, spending money on prostitution, in every way dishonoring the family name and squandering the family inheritance. But then, in a series of God-orchestrated events, a famine comes to that region. The son, who by this time is broke, dead broke, and is out of friends as well as out of money, has actually sunk to feeding pigs. Now you have to understand, the most reprehensible, unclean animal to the Jewish mind in the day of Jesus was a pig. And so this boy had been reduced to doing something that was considered to be at the very bottom of societal behavior. Well, many times when we hit bottom is when we hear the voice of God, maybe for the first time, or at least we pay attention to it. And so the boy decides that in maybe the pouring rain and the mud and squalor, and if you've never been around pigs, you cannot imagine the stench that they produce. It's something you can smell from miles away when the wind is just right. Trust me, we've pastored churches in rural areas, and when the wind was just right, the smell from hogs was almost intolerable. Anyway, he decides to come home reeking of pigs, reeking of the manure of pigs, out of money, having totally disgraced his family and his father. And then we read this amazing account. But while his son was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, which, by the way, in the day that Jesus lived, adult men never ran anywhere. It was considered disgraceful. It was considered humiliating for a man to run in public. He ran to his son. He threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe Bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his fingers and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He is lost, or was lost, and is found. So they began to celebrate. In an earlier program, we discussed 9 or 10 reasons why parents and children become estranged, why they quit speaking to each other, quit traveling to see each other in their adult years. Very sad situation, very prevalent, unfortunately, in our society. In this program, we're talking about how to reverse that. We're talking about how you can come back from the mistakes you may have made in the past to be reconciled with your adult children. And here we see the father demonstrating all 10 of these remarkable traits, and they're traits that we should consider emulating, imitating, if we find our kids as adults estranged, not speaking to us. The first is humility and unselfishness. The father was so humble and so unselfish that despite the fact his name had been dragged through the mud and his family humiliated by the son's behavior, in humility the father went out into the road to wait. In unselfishness, when he saw his son, he ran to him to embrace him, not to condemn him, not to lecture him, but instead to welcome him home. What a humble and unselfish heart he had. I read the story of a famous evangelist whose child was divorced for the second or third time and had to come home to tell her father that her most recent marriage had failed again. But as I read the story, he was standing in the driveway, and as soon as she got out of the car, he ran up and threw both arms around her and hugged her, said he loved her, and welcomed her home. That's the kind of humility that will draw children back to our heart. Number 2 is acceptance and encouragement. The father accepted his child, not his behavior, but he accepted his son just as he was. Clothed in rags, reeking of hogs, just basically having ruined his life, yet the father treated him as if he had never left home and as if he was one of his honored sons. He accepted his son and he encouraged him by his behavior. In fact, he called for a good robe, a ring, new sandals, even a party to be thrown. You know something? If we can accept our children and encourage them, no matter what's happened, it's going to draw their hearts to ours. Now, I'm not saying you have to endorse their behavior or celebrate their decisions. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying as a person, as a child, you accept and you encourage them. Authenticity and transparency. The father was real. He was authentic. His love for his child, his compassion, it was real. There was an authenticity about the man and a transparency. He actually ran to meet his child. He was willing to let everybody see how his heart was drawn to his son. And it didn't matter what the neighbors said or what other people thought. He was transparent. Gentleness and value. Maybe you've lost your kids because you were harsh, you were condemning, you were even maybe abusive. And of course, abuse devalues people by definition. Well, just reverse that. Show a gentleness, show value to your kids, and watch how they'll respond to that. How gentle he was when his son came home. He ran, he hugged him, and as the boy began to blurt out this confession and an apology, the father simply drew him even tighter and turned around and said, please, everybody, let's honor this child again, and let's celebrate the fact that he's alive. What value he showed his son. Literally put clothing and jewelry of value back on him. Patience and thankfulness. You know something, maybe we've been short. We've lost our temper too many times. we've run out of patience with our kids, perhaps adult kids, and they know it, and we've shown our impatience, and we act as if we regret the fact they've been in our lives. Well, the Father did just the opposite. He was very patient. He waited and waited and waited for his son to come home. He stood and he looked in the road and prayed, no doubt, that one day he'd see his son walking back. He was patiently trusting God. And the thankfulness, he just told everybody, let us rejoice. This son of mine that was dead is alive again. Let's throw a party to celebrate this fact. Are you thankful for your kids? Have you told them you're thankful? Have you told them just how delighted you are that they are your son or your daughter? They long to hear that. Remember when Jesus came up out of the water at his baptism, there was a voice from heaven said, "This is my son whom I love. With him I'm well pleased." When have your kids heard that last from your lips? I think if there's an estrangement, it'd be an awfully good place to start. Then there is respect and value. Respect and value. Maybe you've disrespected, maybe you've devalued your kids, and they know that you've disrespected them by your harsh, maybe mean, who knows what you might have said or done, but it was disrespectful. Maybe you've thrown them out. Maybe you've said they'll never amount to anything. I don't know. But it's time to reverse that and show them respect. I mean, the father could have easily said to his son, "Look, son, you're not welcome here. Not till you prove you're really a different kid, and not till I see, some real remorse on your..." He could have gone through a lot. But instead, he welcomed his son, and the contrition was real on the son's part. But he showed him respect and value. He showed him sympathy, and he showed him caring. That's another important thing we can do, is sympathize with our children and show them care, particularly when they've made some horrible decisions that they have suffered for. Yes, they probably know that what they did was foolish and self-destructive. Do they really need us to reinforce that? Do they need us to drive that point home over and over again? Or is there a place for sympathy and caring in which the father, seeing the broken condition of his son, welcomed him back and cared for him and began the process of restoration? Time and attention. Maybe you didn't give your kids time. Maybe you didn't give them attention. Maybe you had other things that were so important to you, your work or even your volunteering at church. I know children that are church orphans because their parents are there every day of the week and the kids are neglected. Well, if that was your mistake, let me just say time and attention can begin to heal that. Well, the father gave his son generous amounts of time, even if the boy didn't know it, by standing and waiting for him. But the attention he gave him when he came home, he didn't let anything distract him from celebrating his son's return and the newfound relationship. Even when the older brother in this story comes and complains that the dad is being too easy on the kid, and it's the older brother deserves a lot more thanks who stayed home than the younger one who left, it still doesn't divert the father from his attention from his son and the party that he's throwing in his honor. Encouragement and joyfulness. A lot of kids are sick and tired of discouragement, and they're sick and tired of sadness and gloom and doom and depression. They're tired of their home being such a somber and joyless place that maybe they decide, I just can't take it anymore, and leave. Well, what about turning your home into a place where everyone who walks through the door is encouraged and there's a spirit of joy in the house, a spirit of having fun, a spirit of celebration? That's what the father did in this story. He throws a big party. He gets the best calf and the best of everything and puts it on the table. Is your home a place of joy, or is it a place of somber sadness? Is it a place of gloom and pessimism and complaining? And finally, confession and forgiveness. The boy needed to confess what he had done. But what was so important was the father was willing to forgive. You notice when the boy says, I've sinned against you and against heaven, the father so obviously receives it that he doesn't even need to say so. Instead, by his actions, he says, look, son, you are forgiven. You're more than forgiven. You're welcomed. You know, I read the story by Ernest Hemingway called The Capital of the World. Took place supposedly in Madrid, where a father and son were estranged because the son had humiliated the father. And he put an ad in the local newspaper. Paco was his son's name. Paco, meet me at the Hotel Montana on Tuesday at noon. All is forgiven, your papa. Well, Tuesday comes and the father wonders, did my boy see this ad in the newspaper? Did he believe me? He shows up at the Hotel Montana at noon, and there isn't just one Paco, there is 800 boys named Paco that are all waiting to meet a father that they wanted to be reconciled with. So let's review the 10 reasons why how you can reconcile with your child. Humility and unselfishness, acceptance and encouragement, authenticity and transparency, gentleness and value, patience and thankfulness, respect and value, sympathy and caring, time and attention, encouragement and joyfulness, confession and forgiveness. Well, let's look at some questions that relate to our topic for this program. This may seem silly, but years ago, when my son was turning 8, we had a birthday party for him in our backyard. We played touch football with his friends, but during the game, I tackled my son instead of just tagging him. I tackled him so hard, he actually got tears in his eyes. Why did you do that, Dad? He asked. It's been decades since that happened. Do you think I need to go back and apologize to him for that? He's a grown man now, in fact, much bigger than I am. You know something? If that memory still comes back to you and you still feel pain and regret as a result, I think it's time to speak to it. The hurts we cause our children are not like the chemicals on the periodical table of elements that degrade, have a half-life, become less strong, every 100 years or whatever, or every 10 years. If you hurt your son, you need to go back and ask his forgiveness. I'm going to guess he still remembers the incident, because you do, and you need to sincerely apologize. It's just never too late to go back and say, what I did was wrong. Will you please forgive me? I want our relationship to be clear of any of these things. Recently, my grown daughter moved in with her girlfriend. They have been dating for over a year and announced they are now engaged. We had a tumultuous relationship when she was growing up. She said she could never please me and felt like I didn't like her. Well, as her mother, I don't approve of her lifestyle, yet I want to have a relationship with her. Can you help me? Well, I don't believe we have to endorse all of our children's adult decisions in order to have some type of meaningful relationship with them. We don't have to agree with their values and their lifestyle in order for them to know that we love them unconditionally, that we care about them, that they are precious to us. As I read the Gospels, Jesus approached several people whose lifestyle and decisions were very contrary to the Ten Commandments or to his character. The woman at the well, for example, the woman caught in adultery, Zacchaeus, and he didn't start by discussing their values or objecting to their lifestyle or their decisions. He began by telling them that he wanted a relationship with them, that he cared about them. He listened to them. He showed them compassion and love and drew them to his heart. I would go back and apologize to your daughter for the tumult in your relationship, at least the part that you believe you were responsible for. I would ask her to share what hurts you caused her and to be specific. And then I would apologize and take responsibility for that. I would apologize for her feeling that she never pleased me and never measured up, that there was an element of judgment or rejection that that may have broke her spirit in some ways. And I want to be cautious with this because she is responsible for her own decisions, but it could have helped set the stage for her looking for love and acceptance from another woman. Now, I say that very, very cautiously because that may not always be the case, particularly when we have a son or daughter that chooses a lifestyle that we're not in agreement. It's not always our fault, but if we played any role in that, we need to apologize for it. And that's as much as you can do at this point. You cannot celebrate her marriage if you believe that that violates your values and biblical values, but you can still reach out as Jesus did to show her an unconditional love and acceptance and communicate just how precious she is, and if you have wronged her, to truly make amends for that. My wife and I grew up during an era when kids were rebelling against everything. As a teenager, I did it all. I partied, I smoked dope, I got high. I lived an immoral lifestyle. Then I became a believer in college. I stopped doing all those things. To keep my kids from making the same stupid mistakes I did at their age, I set up rules and strictly enforced them. Now one of my boys is away at a state school and his friends tell me he's getting drunk and he's partying every weekend. I've never shared with my kids that much about my life before Jesus. Would it do any good now to tell him my story? Well, actually, I believe it would. You gave them all the rules, but may have never given them the why. The why is it grew out of the pain that you caused yourself, the mistakes that ricocheted and ruined your life or broke your heart on many occasions. Naturally, you don't want your kids to do the same thing. I would not either. But there is a danger here. That is that in our zeal to keep our kids from making our mistakes, we go too far. We shield them. We wall them in. We become helicopter parents. We keep them on a short leash to the point that they feel suffocated, to the point where they begin to rebel. There's an old saying that says, rules without relationship produces rebellion. And when there are a lot of rules, but there isn't much relationship, you can just about count on rebellion that's going to occur. So I'd go back and look at the case, okay, I had a lot of rules, but what was my relationship? And now I think you don't want to tell your kids all your bad mistakes. There's details that they don't have to hear and that would only torment them if they did. So no, I don't think you should hold out all the dirty laundry of your life and every immoral act or whatever. But I think you can tell your children honestly that I walked a route of rebellion myself, and I did a number of things, and it came back to wound me more than anyone else. If I've overdone this as a parent, it was out of concern, but I realize I may have overdone it and didn't trust you as much as I should have and let you learn some things, and I apologize for that. Can we begin again? I grew up with a mother who was emotionally brittle. She seemed sad most of the time and was very critical and harsh with us when we did something wrong. I don't remember her ever giving me a compliment, or if she did, very few. I read in the Bible a mother is to be gentle with her children, but I'm not. The sad thing is, I don't even know what gentleness looks like. Where do I begin? Well, I think you have started on an important road by realizing you're not gentle. The opposite of gentleness is harshness, it's meanness, it is being emotionally brittle. I have, with time, I guess growing older, I've realized that we parents need to work through our stuff. We need to settle our issues before we try and settle our kids' issues. Now that doesn't mean we give up parenting and we let them do whatever they want because we haven't fully resolved our own emotional turmoil or wounds. But what it means is that I need to really realize what's broken in me and work on that before I really go after my kids and point out all their faults. You see, one reason is our kids see our faults. We can't hide them. They know. And so being honest about the stuff that you need to resolve, again, revealing only what's appropriate, but saying, I'm looking at my life. I wasn't gentle with you. I was harsh way too many times. Would you forgive me? I'm learning gentleness. And I hope you'll allow me the opportunity to begin showing that to you. Better late than never, huh? Would you give me a chance to do that? And even if you don't articulate it, simply begin doing it. How do you learn gentleness? Well, the scriptures tell us that God is gentle with us, and you can look at the Bible and see how he deals with, how Jesus dealt with people. But find a gentle mother. Find someone whose kids are crazy about her as adults and love to be with her. And then hang around her and figure out what she does and begin to incorporate that in your own life. Maybe one more quick question. I have a question about the story of the prodigal son. Why didn't the father go looking for the son when he heard all about his wild living and warn him before it was too late? Should we be passive with our adult kids and let them destroy their lives? Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think the father was wise. He knew his son, and he knew his son had to come to a certain point on his own to begin to change, that all the pressure, all the lecturing, all the pleading was probably not going to do any good. He knew his boy the way God knows us. And sometimes God has to let us hit the bricks, so it speaks, in order for us to change. It's very hard on a parent to do that, very hard on God to see us suffer. But sometimes it's absolutely vital if we're going to change. Well, we do appreciate you being a part of this audience, and we urge you to join us each week at this same time as we look at the issues of marriage and parenting and families. Until next time, remember, marriage is for better, for worse, and for keeps.